Welcome back to the YouTube channel of Nick Walker Ministries. As you can clearly see behind me, this is not the Cleveland, Tennessee studio. This is not the West Virginia studio. I'm in an all-pink dorm room right now at a youth camp in Laredo, Texas, and we've had a fantastic weekend so far. Now, this is for the YouTube audience, and I have just finished preaching a morning service just a few minutes ago, and we had a service last night. And the young people here in Laredo, Texas, with Pastor Gonzalez, they are hungry for the things of God. And I met them at Warrior Fest, and they asked us to come down here and have a youth camp weekend with them. And so it's a 3-day youth camp, and then I'm preaching at Tree of Life Church on Sunday morning. It's a church that runs about 600 people. So we're having a great time. Lots of deliverance this morning from this topic that I preached on, which is what I kind of want to share with you and just kind of go through the notes of what I shared this morning. Believe it or not, for you who have followed my ministry for a while, you know I can get kind of long-winded. 45 minutes to an hour is my average preaching time. This message was preached in about 25 minutes, and we have to use, of course, a translator, so it was even shorter than that without a translator. 70% of this town is Spanish-speaking, and you can probably hear the screaming and the playing of the kids. We're staying on the campsite this week, and we've had a great time. But I preached on this subject this morning, and I want to share this with our YouTube audience. It is finished. Now, I didn't realize this. I've studied the Bible for many years, but I did not realize that the only time that it is finished is referenced with Christ and what he did on the cross for you and I. It's only mentioned in the book of John, and it's in John chapter 19, verses 28 to 30. It says, "After this, when Jesus knew that all was now finished, he said, in order to fulfill the scripture, 'I am thirsty.' A jar of sour wine was standing there, so they put a sponge in the wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. And when Jesus had received the wine, he said, 'It is finished.' Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit." And of course, this was the moment where the work of Jesus was complete. This is the moment where atonement was made for the sin of the whole world, for the sin of you and I. This is the moment where his mission was finished. And in fact, the word finished in Greek is teleo, and it means to complete a mission or to carry out a full operation, to carry out an operation in its fullness, in its completion, all the way to the end, dotting every I, crossing every T. The work has been finished. And recently, I watched Annalise, my beautiful fiance. Her uncle was graduating from the U.S. Marshal Program, and we went to watch his graduation. And we're there with all these families. Several hundred people were in attendance to watch these men and women graduate from a very rigorous 20-week program. And they walked us outside to a finish line. It was under a portico of the graduation building, and the commanding officer was talking to all the families, and he said, "Today's graduation day, but they cannot graduate until they complete what they're doing right now, which is called the Marshall Mile." And to my best of my memory, it was a 9 or 10 mile run, and between every mile, they had to do all kinds of rigorous exercises, burpees, and different things that they had to do. And they said they cannot graduate until they complete this race. And I want you to, or not the race, but the run. I want you to think about that. They went through a 20-week rigorous program, a very grueling program mentally. They spent all that time away from their families in a town in Georgia, completing this training to earn the star of the U.S. Marshal. And they could not graduate. Even though they'd gone through all the 20-week program, they could not graduate until they finished the race. And I am grateful that Jesus finished his work. He didn't leave one I undotted. He did not uncross one T. He finished every single work. Now, some of you are listening to this and you're like, this is a very simple gospel message. Well, that's the great thing about these young people in Laredo, Texas. They don't need anything deep. They don't need anything crazy. They just need the simple gospel. And in the scriptures, Paul writes that the gospel is for the simple person, and they are responding to the simple gospel. All I told them was that Jesus' work was finished. Well, then we have to ask, what is the assignment of Jesus? Jesus had 3 main assignments. The first one was to bridge the gap between God and men. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5 describes Jesus being the mediator. There is one mediator between God and men. His second assignment was to reconcile the world back to God. 2 Corinthians 5:19, Christ reconciles the world back to himself, is what Paul writes. And the third assignment, of course, my favorite, 1 John chapter 3, verse 8. He came to destroy the work of the devil. And so if those are the assignments of Christ, and his living, his death, and his resurrection confirmed and completed all of that, then what we can say is if we accept Jesus, then we accept his finished work. And if we accept his finished work, the enemy no longer has permission to bind. He doesn't have any permission to steal, kill, and destroy as we walk in the completed work of Jesus. Now, many people would say that because Jesus' work is finished, we don't have any work to do. And I believe that's a lazy theology. I believe that's perhaps even a cancerous theology, because there is still work we need to do, friends. There are still people that need saved. There are still lives that need changed. There are still people who are oppressed of the devil. But Acts 10:38 says Jesus heals everyone who is oppressed of the devil. Listen to what Paul says in 2 Timothy chapter 4. He's writing to Timothy, and he says, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, and I have kept the faith. He fought a good fight. He finished the race. Paul finished the race. He didn't say Jesus finished the race, which of course Jesus did. He finished his assignment, which is why he said it is finished. Paul said, I have finished my race. And so because Jesus has finished his assignment, we now have the ability through him to fulfill our assignment. That's all I shared with them this morning. It was a very simple 25-minute message, and I want to tell you there were dozens of young people. Eric and I were talking. Eric's behind the camera. Pearson's here with me. We were talking about we gave a call for young people who were dealing with a spirit of suicide. Now, there's probably close to 100 people at this camp. Easily 1/4 of the room raised their hands and said, I need delivered from a spirit of suicide. The enemy is resting on a generation, getting them to do all sorts of wicked, terrible, perverted things, even down to taking their own life. They feel purposeless. They feel lost. But just by the preaching of this simple gospel message, many, many people were set free from the spirit of suicide. Many were set free from pornography addiction. We had young men and young women who were addicted to pornography who came and gave that to Jesus at the altar this morning. So because of his finished work, we have the ability to walk out and complete our assignment for the Lord. Because of his finished work, we have the ability to walk in reconciliation as Christ has reconciled us back to God. And because of his finished work, we can cross the bridge that he built, because he bridged the gap between God and men. And finally, we have the ability through Christ to destroy the work of the devil in our culture. And believe me, there is a lot of work of the devil in our culture right now. So thank you for joining me. We always want to take time wherever we are on the road, tell you about what's going on. So I hope this was a blessing to you as it was a blessing to the young people here in Laredo, Texas. We have a full weekend, and in about 3 hours we have another church service. So be praying for us. You'll probably see this after the camp is over, but we love you. Thank you for keeping up with us, and we'll see you next week. God bless you, everybody.